Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me in completing the loan estimate webinar. My name is Ladrika Burton, and I am a professional services consultant. I have over 7 years of experience in the mortgage banking industry, as well as experienced underwriter, processor, and auditor, and detailed knowledge with the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and VA guidelines. A bit of housekeeping. All the attendees are muted. If you have Point on your computer, you may want to follow along with me if you have that option to do so. You can ask questions via the question box on the control panel. The PowerPoint presentation is only available during the webinar, so it is in the handout section on your control panel of the GoToWebinar. So if you have not already done so, you may want to go ahead and grab it, print it, or save it to your computer. A recording of this webinar will be available on our website. We send these recordings to our marketing department, so we are not sure the exact day and time that they'll be posted because our marketing department do have to configure them to post them to the website. The legal disclaimer: the information presented is confidential and proprietary to Calix software and may not be disclosed without the permission of Calix. The purpose of this PowerPoint presentation is to provide information rather than advice or opinion. It is accurate to the best of the speaker's knowledge as of the date of the presentation. To the extent that this presentation contains any examples, please note that they are for illustrative purposes only, and any similarity to actual individuals, entities, places, or situations is unintentional and purely coincidental. In addition, any examples are not intended to serve as legal advice. No part of this presentation may be modified, printed, or presented without the permission of Calix. Calix and Calix software are registered trademarks of Calix Technologies Incorporated. So the format for this webinar, I'm going to do an overview, do some highlights, complete the loan estimate, as well as a written list of service providers, and give you some helpful tips, some knowledge-based articles, as well as further training options. The objectives are: at the end of this webinar, you should be able to navigate and complete the loan estimate, know how fields are populated from the point file, complete the written list of service providers, and print, email, store, and send a loan estimate for electronic signature. So with SP9 just being released, this webinar is going to include and demonstrate some of those features and updates. There's a scheduled webinar on Friday, January the 29th, to address the SP9 release. So if you have not done so already, you may want to go to our website to see if you can get registered for the one that is this Friday. So tomorrow, there's also going to be another one on February the 3rd. So the next few slides will highlight some of the features and updates. And basically our SP9 is going to, we've basically made data entry for generating trade forms even more efficient. The updates also provide flexibility in the presentation of calculations when generating the new disclosures, and allow document vendors to generate the loan estimate and closing disclosure. So some important things that you should know about the freezing of the loan estimate. The freezing of your loan estimate is specifically done if, in fact, something changes. You've already disclosed your loan estimate, you're getting ready to disclose your closing disclosure. That's when you would want to freeze the calculation. So upon hitting that freeze button, it's going to allow Point to not recalculate any of the things that you've already disclosed on your loan estimate, because you want to preserve the initial loan estimate information when you're getting ready to disclose your closing disclosure. So the fees worksheet is decoupled from your loan estimate. So to prevent the fees from automatically adjusting on the fees worksheet when importing to AUS, the loan estimate and fees worksheet has been decoupled. The freeze fees checkbox on your fees worksheet is to prevent the fees from automatically adjusting on the fees worksheet if the loan amount is changed after the loan estimate is disclosed. So that's simply just going to allow you to keep that original loan estimate information without it recalculating if something did change when you're getting ready to disclose your closing disclosure. So point SB9 feature, the new freeze, this is what it's going to look like on your fees worksheet. So right underneath your term and due in, you are going to see the freeze fees with the loan amount disclosed in loan estimate. Selecting the checkbox will enter the loan amount in the freeze field. So it's going to put that $240 in that box for you once you've checked it. And the loan amount may be changed without causing the automatic recalculation of fees. So you'll notice that it did preserve the $240 in that freeze fees box because it was checked, and now the loan amount is $220. The next SB9 update is going to be dealing with entering the cash deposit. Your cash deposit fields are located on the loan estimate, your loan application. So on your loan estimate, you have the payoffs and payment screen. On the loan application, you're going to enter in the amount of the cash deposit on page 3. The cash deposit on page 3 will populate page 4, section 1, in the details of transaction. The loan estimate features a new payoffs and adjustment screen with the field for cash deposit. So you would access that payoffs and adjustment screen by selecting the payoffs and adjustments button on the loan estimate window. So at the very bottom of that window, you're going to see this next to your change of circumstance. Once you select that button, you're going to be able to enter in the amount of the cash deposit because it will not automatically come over. So you're going to basically key in the exact same thing that you keyed in on your loan application. So once you get to your actual loan estimate, you're going to see the deposit section, and it is going to have that exact same amount that you've entered in the calculating cash to close. The next thing that we're going to look at with the SB9 update is going to be entering in the homeowner's insurance on your loan estimate. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to input on the borrower information the homeowners association amount. You will then open up your fees worksheet and go to section 9, the initial deposit for your escrow account, and you are going to manually enter in the homeowners association description. So however you want that wording to show, you will manually enter it in. So you can type out homeowners association dues, or you can actually put HOA. You'll put the paid to, and you will not enter in any months. You will enter in the amount, and then it is going to populate on your loan estimate with a no next to it. So on this example here, you'll see where it says other, and it says homeowners association dues, and it asks if it's an escrow. The answer is no. The next thing with our SB9 update is going to be the written list of service providers. The written list of service providers is used with the loan estimate and closing disclosure forms in Point. So if the loan estimate and closing disclosures are printed in Point rather than by using a closing document company, then the written list of service providers is printed with these disclosures. Each screen requires manual entry of the service provider information. So if the service provider information is printed in Point and is also provided at the closing document company through the Point interface, then you're gonna complete both of these. If the loan estimate and closing disclosures are generated by a closing documents company through one of the interfaces in your Services tab or your Interfaces menu, then you're going to complete the Service Providers list. Your service company information is exported from the Service Providers list to the closing documents company through the Point interface. So if you're going to be printing them in Point, you're going to be using the written list of service provider. If you're going to be using a closing documents company, you're going to be using the Service Providers list. Now here's a look at basically your fees worksheet and that information populating over to your loan estimate. So you have your origination charges and your credit and charge points going to Section A of your loan estimate for origination. You also have the required services that we can select, which is going to go to Section B for services that you cannot shop for. The title service and lender title insurance will go to services you can shop for, Section C of your loan estimate. Your owner's title insurance is going to go to Other on your loan estimate. Your required services that you can shop for will go to Section C, services you can shop for. The government recording as well as your transfer tax is going to go to the taxes and other government fees. The initial deposit into your escrow will go into Section G, so the initial escrow payment at closing. Your daily interest, homeowner's insurance, and your prepays all will flow over to your prepaid section of your loan estimate in Section F, and then the other charges will go into your Section H for Other on your loan estimate. Here are a few updated knowledge-based articles you may already be familiar with, but with SP9 you want to make sure that you go ahead and follow up with those, review them, revisit them. If you need to reprint them out, then you go ahead and do that, because with the release they have been updated. And then you have the resources that you may currently utilize. Remember, always in Point, you can use F1 on any screen. You have your Point user guide, our support online, as well as our customer support, your account sales manager. And anytime that you need individual training, we provide our professional services, so you would need to speak with your account manager if you are interested in requesting that. So that concludes the PowerPoint presentation. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up Point. Remember that if you have not already taken the handout from your control panel on the webinar toolbar, you want to make sure that you go ahead and do it, because the PowerPoint presentation is not put on our website. You only have access to it when you're on the actual webinar. So save it to your computer or print it off if you have not already. At the end of the webinar, I will try to answer as many questions as I possibly can. If time permits, the questions that are not answered, we will address them. We do save all of the questions, and I'll leave the window open so that more questions can be submitted, and then we upload them at a later time. Okay, so I'm going to go into my file. And I have just my typical purchase file. My closing cost scenario has been populated, as well as my loan program. I've populated all of my information. I have my homeowners association dues here that I've input. So I'm going to go take a look at my fees worksheet. Okay, and I'm just populating my fields, so I'm making sure that I have all of my information selected. This freeze button, if you have not already updated to SP9, some of the buttons that you see on my screen you may not necessarily have just yet, It's just a matter of whenever you're going to update to the SB9 release. So what you'll notice initially at the beginning of the window is that I have a drop-down box that says disclosure types, and this is just going to communicate to the closing document as well as the compliance company that either it's going to be TRID or GFE that's being disclosed. The next thing that I discussed is going to be the freeze option. Freeze option basically is if when you are getting ready to do your closing disclosure, if you've already disclosed your loan estimate, of course, you don't want any of the calculations to change. You want to preserve that initial loan estimate information so that you can compare it to the closing disclosure. You want to check that box. So all of my fees are being populated for me. I utilize my closing cost scenario, so I don't have to manually go in there and populate those fees. Now you do see the additional buttons added here where I have my loan estimate for quick access as well as my written list of service providers. So I'm going to click on my loan estimate. And on my loan estimate, you'll notice that most of the fields are already grayed out for me. So that means that all of those fields are coming from other places in Point. Other places in Point will automatically default on your loan estimate with the exception of a few. Of course, your date field for the application date, my loan ID, which is also on page 1 of your 1003. If you wanted to input it here, you definitely have the ability to do that. The lock expires and cost expires, those fields are directly populating for the rate lock. So you want to make sure that you're putting in the correct lock expires date. And you have your time zone from your drop-down. So if you've done a borrower master template, you'll notice that this information is populated on the GFE. So if you've done a master template and you've defaulted it with information, you'll notice that here is where you would default that information. So if my end of business was 5 p.m., I would default that for my borrower master template so that all my users will have that information, and then that information will automatically come over to my loan estimate for me. If you lock your loan in Point, you have the track registration and rate lock window, which will allow you to input that information. So if you scroll down on that page, so you go to your to menu for track registration and rate lock, you're going to scroll down on that window until you get to the registration and lock request. You will enter in the lock date. So if you locked it today and you input your days, you'll notice that Point will automatically give you a lock expires date. So my lock expires is going to be March the 13th, 2016. So what I'm going to do is take that to my loan estimate and input that there. So March the 13th, my cost expires. And the next field that I have to manually enter is going to be confirm receipt. So if I would like to have a signature line as well as a date line on my loan estimate, I want to make sure that I check that box. You have the ability to check that box and default it in your borrower master template. If you've defaulted some of your templates for your users, then you have the ability to have that already selected for you. So most of my fees and charges information is already coming over from my fees worksheet. So if I go back to my fees worksheet, and let's say I have a lender credit. So if I have a lender credit, I'm going to enter it in my credit section. And I'm going to input 1%. And when I go to at the very bottom of my fees worksheet, I'm going to click on my payments and adjustments. So I've entered in my lender credit. Now, at the very bottom of my window, I want to make sure that I click on that payoffs and adjustments. And where it says lender credit, I'm going to enter in that amount. So let me get my amount again. And that amount that I entered is going to be $1688.74. Now, the reason that you have to double entry things is because the loan application and your fees worksheet has been decoupled for calculation purposes. Because then on the fees worksheet, you now have the ability to manually enter in information for the exact amount, and we had to decouple the windows and prevent it from automatically rounding and automatically calculating things where you want to manually enter them. So you're going to have to make sure that when you're putting information on your loan application, so on the borrower information window, it does not automatically come over to your fees worksheet. So the taxes and insurance, you're going to make sure that you have to manually now enter them on your fees worksheet, because now you can put exact dollar amounts. So if it's $50.73, you can put $50.73. So now I have my total lender credits in there. I'm going to go to my loan estimate. And I'm going to do, right now, a print preview. Okay, so now my loan estimate has been populated with my applicant's information, the date issued, the property sales price. I have my loan term, it's the purchase type, the product, it's conventional, the loan ID that I typed in on my loan estimate field populated here, and my rate lock information is selected as yes, because on my track registration and rate lock, I went ahead and put that information in there. If I had not, it would be saying no. My loan amount is here with the interest rate, my monthly principal and interest payment. If there were prepayment penalty or my balloon payment, that will be selected here. Here is now a breakdown of my projected payment amount. And you'll notice that my property taxes, my homeowner's insurance, both are saying escrow, and the HOA that I input, which should not be escrowed, is saying no. I have my estimated closing costs here with the estimated cash to close. Page 2, you're going to see my loan cost breakdown with my origination charges, The services that you cannot shop for, services you can shop for, so all of my title services. If you want those services to show up in alphabetical order, remember you will have to input them as they are already defaulted in the system. So you would have to do title dash whatever that fee is to make sure that they're in alphabetical order. Here you'll see my recording fees and other taxes and transfer taxes, my homeowner's insurance here, my prepaid, the initial escrow payment breakdown here, my titles insurance. If there were other costs, they would be here, and for my total other cost, you see the lender credit that I input. Of course, it is on the loan estimate, so it is rounded. So you have the $1,689. And then you have my calculating cash to close. So on page 3, you want to make sure that in your track agent list, that on that, whichever side that you're operating as, if you are a broker or if you are a lender, that you are populating the LO's information, because that is required for your loan estimate to populate that information here. It does not automatically at this moment pull from your loan application. It does not automatically pull from the originator's drop-down list that you've populated. So you'll see my comparison. You have my APR as well as my tip table here, the other considerations that came from your till screen, and that box that we checked at the end of our loan estimate, here is now putting that signature and date field for me. So here under track agent list, whichever that you are acting as, so here in this webinar I am acting as the broker, you want to make sure that you populate this top portion with the loan officer, so you may want to add them to your Cortex if you don't want to have to manually enter in their license number as well as their NMLS. It will not automatically pull over their NMLS or their license number. Your company, it will pull over that information from the company defaults. So if I go back to my loan estimate and do a print preview, and go to my page 3, here I have my company, the NMLS number, I have the loan officer that I populated on that track agent list, I have my NMLS number, my email, as well as a telephone contact. So it's very important that you populate that field on your track agent because it is required per CFPB for contact requirements. So whichever one of these that you're acting as, you want to make sure that you default the top portion of this for your loan officer, because your company information is going to automatically default from your utilities and company defaults. So added to this window for our loan estimate, you now see your fees worksheet, your payoffs and adjustment screen. So you can quickly access it from the fees worksheet, or you can quickly access it from your loan estimate screen. The lender credit, you're going to enter it there. If in fact there is a cash deposit, because remember that the screens are now decoupled, so back on our loan application, For our cash deposit, so let's say we put in $1,200. I entered it there. And now I'm going to go to my loan estimate because these screens are decoupled. So I'm going to have to physically, manually enter it in on my payoffs and adjustments window. Here, the very first top box, you will then manually enter it there. And I put $1,200. So now when I go to do a print preview of my loan estimate, at the very top of our window, you'll now see, and let me make that a little bigger, the cash deposit, the total lender credits, seller credits. So that's going to be broken down for you. So yes, you will have to do a double entry because the windows have been decoupled to allow for individual calculations. So you want to make sure that when you enter it on your loan application that you are coming to your payoffs and adjustments window and entering it in. And once again, you can access that payoffs and adjustments window from your fees worksheet window as well as your loan estimate window. So now that you've completed your loan estimate, so you've completed your loan estimate, and we are doing standard, so we want to make sure, because this is not a refinance, our standard box is already selected by default. Of course, if it was a refinance, you would be making sure that you're checking that box for the alternative form. So we've completed our loan estimate, and because we are doing our loan estimate and we're printing it from point, we're going to go ahead and go to our written list of service providers. In our written list of service providers, basically what you're going to be doing is populating the service provider at the top. Once again, this is a great way to utilize your Cortex to pre-populate all of those fields with the contacts that you have. So you can add as many as you want to, have all the different categories that you have. The icon at the very end of this line is going to be so that you can access the Cortex. And that way you'll be able to populate the information from which you've already defaulted in your Cortex. So once I've selected that, it's populated. I can save and close or save and new. If I save and close, that's going to automatically be here. I'll go down to the service at the bottom. Add the verbiage for however you want to list that service. Put in my estimate. And then select the provider that I've defaulted at the top from my drop-down box. So when I do save and close, and I do a print preview of this window, now it has populated my written list of service providers for services that you can shop for. It has the title fee, the estimate, who the provider is, and the contact information. Now, if you use the same provider for all of your services for a certain type of master template that you have, you definitely have the ability to default that in a master template. So in the master template, you would go into your template section and select your master templates, come to your written list of service provider, and default the providers up top. If you utilize the same providers for every single loan, it's not going to be any different. You can definitely default those service providers at the top. And then once you're in the actual loan, then you'll be able to come down here and just add the service and then select whichever provider that you've defaulted at the very top. Back to my loan estimate. Now for populating the contact information, what I want you guys to remember is that in my track agent list, remember I said that you want to make sure that you can definitely input the loan officers in your Cardex. What happens in the Cardex is that it does not bring over. So if I select new, it does not, you see it has a license field here. This field has not been programmed to automatically populate onto the track agent list as of yet. So even if you put in that license number here, it will not automatically come over to your track agent list. You still will have to manually key that in. So you still will have to manually key it in here, as well as the NMLS number, because it will not automatically come over for you. So back to my loan estimate. My fees are coming over as they correctly should. What you want to make sure that if you are utilizing a master template, then you'll know that because of the master template that you've already defaulted, most of the information that you populate onto your till, because you still will be utilizing your till to default some of the fields on your loan estimate, will already be set for you. But if you're not using a master template, you want to make sure that you come to your till to populate these fields, to populate information over like your late charge information, the escrow account information, servicing, liabilities after foreclosure. You want to make sure that you are coming to this window still and utilizing it. Even though we're not providing this, you're still utilizing it in point to default onto your loan estimate. It's a lot easier if you just create a master template to default all of the little checkboxes that you can utilize and make it easier for your users. The other screen that you may want to default with the time zone and drop down if you want it to is going to be the GFE. So you can definitely default this in a master template for whatever your close of day is and the time zone, because that is important. You don't necessarily have to put the interest rate available through as well as your estimate available through, because those windows are open on your loan estimate, so you have the ability to put them on there. But if you wanted the time zone as well as the end of day to be defaulted for you, you can definitely do that on your GFE with a master template. So back on my fees worksheet, remember that your lender paid compensation does not go onto your loan estimate. That specifically goes onto the closing disclosure. So that's where you're going to be populating it on the closing cost worksheet for your closing disclosure. This field here now is utilized in point strictly for QM calculations. So if you want this to be included in your QM calculation, you want to make sure that you check the box and complete the appropriate fields. So once you get ready, once you do your QM, you're going to uncheck the box and now go to your loan estimate, because if you do keep the box checked and that information checked, it is going to impact your cash to close. So remember that the lender paid compensation only goes on the closing disclosure, not on your loan estimate. So if this box is checked and you've input your percentage or you've input the amount, it is going to affect your calculations. When you're just wanting to do it for QM, go ahead, check the box, input your information, either the percentage or the dollar amount, run your QM findings, uncheck the box, and now go to your loan estimate. and nothing will be affected. Back to my fees worksheet. So you've ran your loan estimate. If you are getting ready to do your closing disclosure, you would want to go ahead and freeze the fees that were initially disclosed on your loan estimate so that that comparison, that original information, will be compared to your closing disclosure. Even if you're sending the information off to a closing documents company, you still want to make sure that you check the box just so that information will come over there. It will export over to your closing docs company. What now shows those boxes will show on the loan estimate in section 9 for escrowed. I have my hazard insurance, my county property tax reserves. Those are automatically going to come over once I've checked that box to my loan estimate for me. So I have my boxes checked. You'll notice that my HOA still don't have it checked because that is not included in the escrow. What that looks like, as I showed you earlier, is it's just going to have a yes by it. So here it's going to say the estimate includes. It's going to have in escrow, yes or no, and you'll be able to say, okay, well, HOA, of course, you know you're not going to have that included in the escrow, so that's going to have a no by it, and you have your property tax and your homeowner's insurance. Under your payoffs and adjustments, remember that you're going to be entering in the cash deposits, lender credits, as well as seller credits. You're going to be entering all of that information in on the payoffs and adjustments that you can access from the fees worksheet or your loan estimate. And because they are decoupled, once you enter them on your borrower information, it does not automatically pull over to your fees worksheet. So back to my loan estimate. The four main fields that you want, screens that you want to make sure that you're always utilizing when doing your loan estimate is going to be your till screen. If you're defaulting your master template with the time and time zone, it's going to be your GFE, your track agent list for contact requirements, and your fees worksheet. If you don't have a master template set up, you don't have to utilize the GFE screen because that window is open on your loan estimate. But it's a lot easier to have the system defaulted for your users because it cuts down on the repetitive manually entering in things. It cuts down on the different verbiage used across the different users, and it's going to basically cut down on errors. So I highly encourage everyone to utilize the template section. If you are admin, go in there, set those loan programs up, go in there and set that those closing cost scenarios up so that your users can definitely utilize them as opposed to manually entering in the fees every single time. Just like with your defaults, you want to with your master templates, you want to go ahead and set that up in your master template to default all of those little checkboxes that will populate onto your loan estimates, and nothing is forgot. Okay, so now I am going to open up the window for questions that does complete our loan estimate webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and open questions. I'm going to answer as many as I possibly can. We don't always have the ability to answer all of them, but what we do is we take all of the questions. I'll leave the window open a little bit longer so that if your question was not answered during the webinar, you'll still be able to submit it. We answer them at a later time, and then they'll be posted onto our website. And I am going to put the last page of our PowerPoint presentation up so that you can get those KB articles. Some of them you may have already visited, but you want to make sure that you go back and revisit them because they have been updated with SB9. So one question is, if flood will be escrow but HOA is not, how would that reflect on the LE? So on our LE, you're going to see it exactly as you see it on my screen. Let's see. And when I go to my loan estimate, I'm going to do my print preview. And it's going to include the property taxes, homeowners insurance, and it's going to say other, which is the flood is included in the other, but the HOA is going to say no. So you will notice that the amount increased from what we initially put because I did add the amount for flood. The next question I have is how do you draft the loan checklist? So for my loan checklist, which you see on the far right-hand side of my window, that's going to be taken care of under your track status. Basically, what this is going to do is your loan checklist is going to capture any third-party documents as well as the document request. As long as you have the required box checked, it is going to show them on your loan checklist in the information bar. So if I were to, let's say I received, anytime that you order credit in Point, it's going to automatically say ordered and received on the same day. So what you'll notice is that on your checklist, that item is going to be crossed out. Just like with any of the required documents, if there's a document that you want to have required, you want to make sure that you have these checked. So you can also default these in your borrower master template for the users. So they'll automatically be there. You can just go in and start defaulting any of the documents that you know that you're going to be utilizing for any loan, regardless of the loan type. These are the documents that you're going to need. Make sure you go in and default them in a borrower master template and then select the box for required. Because if I just went in here and started unselecting these boxes, you'll notice that my list is getting shorter. So once I go back in, check them, it's going to stay there. So that's all you would need to do in order to have your checklist showing. Okay, going to the next question. Is there any way to pre-populate the provider list? As I stated earlier, if you're utilizing the exact same service provider for a certain loan type that you have, you can definitely go ahead and default that in your borrower master template. So on your written list of service providers, if you utilize the same provider, go ahead and default that. You can go ahead and default the service providers here, simply typing in their name, or you can utilize the Cortex and populate them here. The next question I have is, will the license number transfer from the Cortex to the tracking screen with the new update? No, it has not been programmed to automatically transfer over to your track agent list, so that you will still have to key in that license number. Okay, next question. It says, our company information seems to be populated in all the right places, but it never prints the first time. You may want to call support because if you have it defaulted in your company defaults for the drop downs, it should be printing on your documents. I'm not sure why it will not print for you the first time, so you may want to contact support. The NMLS number is not for the bank, is not printing on this page. So once again, you may want to contact support because as long as you have that NMLS number defaulted in that field, it's going to automatically print onto your form. Will line of credit that was just entered be shown the details transaction? Yes. Okay, looking at more questions. Okay, so I'm scrolling back down. How do you activate the pop-up for hoovering over the fields? So basically, you're going to go to your utilities. You don't have to be in a loan file to do this. Utilities, it's going to be on an individual loan basis. You're going to enable your field pop-up help. Okay, the next question I have is going to be, on the LE, where would be a good place to put the hazard insurance one-time payment and not escrowed? So you're wanting to put the hazard insurance on the LE. So basically, let's go back to our fees worksheet. So in our fees worksheet, you can definitely put it in the payoffs and adjustments section. You can put it in the other. If it's not going to be escrowed, you may put it in the other section, put a detailed description, the amount, but it's not going to show in that box as hazard insurance and escrowed. Or on the payoffs and adjustment screens, you have the adjustments and other credits here that you may put it on, and you can access that from the fees worksheet or the loan estimate. Okay, the questions are not populated online as of right now. Those are done at a later time. Doesn't matter. None of the questions from the webinars that we've done so far, this question about the questions that are submitted, none of them are posted as of right now. Our marketing department is still compiling those. Okay, what's the benefit to freezing? So the benefit to freezing is if there was a change in the loan for whatever reason, the loan amount or any other thing that changed after you've disclosed the loan estimate and you're getting ready to disclose the closing disclosure, in order to keep that original information that was initially disclosed on your loan estimate, you would have to select that freeze button in order for that comparison to be on the closing disclosure. So that's what the benefit is. It's going to freeze all the information. It will not auto-calculate on your fees worksheet because there are certain fields on your fees worksheet that will automatically calculate just based on percentages when you put in different loan amounts. So what the freeze button do is it holds in that original information that was disclosed with the loan estimate, because you can't go back and redisclose the loan estimate and you're doing the closing disclosure. Okay, if I put the cash deposit under assets, does it duplicate assets or will it show up on details of transaction? So your cash deposit should not be put in your assets. You're going to enter it in the deposit section. So you're going to go to page 3 of your loan application. You're going to enter it here. So under the assets section, you're going to enter it here. And then on your page 4 of your application, you're going to have the cash deposit here. So let me delete this. So page 3, we've entered our cash deposit here. And now we go over to page 4, and you're going to have to manually enter it in here. So I'm just going to type this in. Put in my $1,200. I'm now going to go to my loan estimate field because the windows are decoupled, remember. And now I'm going to have to physically put it here in my payoffs and adjustments under the cash deposit because it will not manually come over here from my application. I'm going to have to physically put it in there. So it's not duplicating anything. It's just going to show it on your loan estimate, and you're going to have it on your 1003. Okay, the next question. So our next question, well, there's a lot of questions regarding the freeze. Basically, with your freeze, if there's any change that you have to make before you disclose, before you do your closing disclosure, what you're going to do is manually key those in on the closing cost worksheet to update any of those changes. So when you're freezing it, you're just preserving what you already disclosed to the homeowner on the loan estimate. So that's not going to change for them. So when you give them the closing disclosure, they're not going to see a completely different amount in that field that shows the loan estimate compared to the closing disclosure, because they've already signed and dated the initial closing, the loan estimate, and then you're presenting them with a closing disclosure that has a completely different amount on it. Okay, and I am going to close the question box. I will leave the window open a little bit longer just so if you want to submit more questions so that we can answer them at a later date and then they'll all be posted online for you guys, go ahead and start submitting those. I'll leave the window open. I'll also leave the knowledge base articles up just in case you want to grab those. Remember to please get the handout from the handout section if you have not already done so, because these PowerPoint presentations are not entered in on your on our website. They're specifically only going to be given to you during the webinar. Thank you guys so much for joining me with completing the loan estimate. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.